Former Prime Minister John Howard says industrial relations policy has slipped backwards since he left office and urged the opposition to return to the issue. The government says it's more evidence the coalition is planning to resurrect Mr Howard's controversial work choices laws. But Tony Abbott says he won't revisit the past. Political correspondent Tom Eagleton has more from Canberra.
Tony Abbott's been spending lots of time in Queensland of late, and today he was looking in on a mine near Mackay and a young, aspiring welder.
When you learn, you can teach me how to do it.
Mr Abbott's been courting blue-collar voters who were scared off by the coalition in the 2007 election by John Howard's work choices policy. Now Mr Howard's dipping back into the debate.
The one area where we've gone backwards is IR, and I think that's a great shame, and I think as the time goes by, the consequences of that will become greater.
The former Prime Minister's comments were recorded at a closed-door business forum earlier this month, admitting some aspects of work choices were a mistake, but backing his earlier workplace policies.
There's no reason why this country should not go back to the workplace system we had between 1996 and 2005, where you had individual contracts. I hope that in their own way the coalition returns to this issue.
The Workplace Relations Minister gave his summary of Mr Howard's contribution.
Work choices wasn't so bad and it should be brought back.
The opposition leader downplayed the comments.
John Howard is 2 Prime Ministers ago. John Howard is 3 Liberal leaders ago.
But Tony Abbott is promising to make changes to industrial relations policy if he wins government, and has said there are problems with the government's individual flexibility agreements system.
Mr Abbott needs to make explicit, does he support what Mr Howard is saying with statutory individual contracts, or doesn't he?
I think these agreements need to be made more workable, but there's no going back to the past.
The government's pressing Mr Abbott for details of what he'd do.
Now is time for Mr Abbott to bring on the workplace relations debate that we have to have.
Meanwhile, there's been a slight bump in the government's latest poll numbers. The Nielsen poll now giving Labor a 32% share of the primary vote, up 2 points, and putting Julia Gillard just a whisker ahead of Tony Abbott as preferred Prime Minister. Despite the good news, the Prime Minister dodged the waiting media today and gave little away when they caught up with her.
Look, I don't comment on opinion polls, thanks very much.
Tony Abbott was less backward in coming forward.
If you want to look at a poll, look at the Northern Territory poll, a classic example of how bad governments get punished.
The Labor government in Darwin lost the weekend election despite a warning that a Conservative government would cut public services. But in Queensland, a Galaxy poll suggests there's been a dramatic plunge in support for LNP Premier Campbell Newman.
It's been great to be here at the Queensland Ballet for the last 2 days.
Who chose an unusual venue for a cabinet meeting to finalise public service cuts in his state ahead of next month's budget.
Other politicians would have gone to a plush resort. We've gone to a government building in West End.
The cool public response to Mr Newman's austerity will catch federal Labor's attention. Tony Abbott has plans to reduce the Commonwealth public service.
He understands exactly what we're trying to achieve because I've taken him through it, and he's very understanding, and indeed he and people like Joe Hockey have been incredibly supportive.
Unlike the public service unions. Tom Eagleton, Lateline.